Hello everyone, what is up? It is me, Ewan from What Culture, joined as ever by the not-so-American Josh Brown.
Not really, but
to talk
thank
to you
you.
Today about the Falcon and Winter Soldier series, because yes, it is coming out this year and we're all very excited, and some really big casting news broke this week. Carl Lumley, who played, I think he voiced Martian Manhunter in the Justice League cartoon from like 10 years ago, so obviously I'm really excited about that. He was actually cast in the series, Deadline reported that this week, and there has been some rumours that he could be playing Isaiah Bradley, who first appeared in the story Truth, Red, White and Black, which was all about the Project Rebirth and the Super Soldier Serum program, and how the official narrative that kind of the US government kind of made or the narrative that we all assumed regarding that, where Professor Erskine came over from Nazi Germany and created this serum and he gave it to Steve Rogers and he became, Captain America. Turns out there was some not so rosy things that happened afterwards. Now, people may already be aware of the fact that in the 1950s, the government recreated the Captain America program to not so good results, and that led to a Nazi version of the character where he went insane, which wasn't too good. But also, there was a whole thing here, and the actual story here, written, I believe, by Robert Morales and with art from Carl Baker. It actually goes and takes inspiration from the Tuskegee experiments, which is a really horrible thing that actually happened during, from the 1930s all the way up until the 1970s, where the US government actually experimented on an African American population and gave them syphilis, and it was really, really horrible. Basically, torture sanctioned by the government. And what Red, White, and Black does is it uses that as a basis to look at the Super Soldier Serum program and how the US government actually kind of did some really, really messed up things. And Isaiah Bradley is the Captain America who actually emerges from this program. The US government actually kills and executes everyone else involved, and that's after all of the other people who have been involved have suffered massively debilitating, effects from the actual experiments, and it's not too pleasant.
No, not at all, but it's a really interesting thread to tackle in the upcoming series, I think, because by the sounds of it, we're going to have a bunch of people vying for the Captain America mantle, and a lot of them are going to be government sanctions, and then of course we have, Sam on the outside of this, who doesn't really want to take on the responsibility of being Captain America, but who will no doubt, come out at the very end as the best choice. This entire story around Isaiah Bradley, I wasn't actually familiar with it before doing research for this news, but it's a fascinating parallel between that and, the experiments like you mentioned, especially the syphilis trial. That's something you learn about if you do any kind of psychology course, because it's just such an ethical nightmare. Like you said, they experimented on these people, this African American population, for decades without telling them that they had syphilis, even though penicillin was invented partway through and they could have treated them. They just wanted to see the effects of what would happen. And I love that, this is going to thread that sort of, those race relations throughout this narrative, because I feel like we're seeing those kinds of themes tackled a lot in media recently, but that really blends into what the US government want out of their Captain America. We've got John Walker also involved, who we all assume is going to play, the US agent, which will be the government-sanctioned replacement for Captain America, who embodies all of their ideals. He looks, from the photos that have been released so far, looks kind of like a military man, so he's going down that. Someone they can trust, but the undercurrent of that is obviously all the lives that have been destroyed in the pursuit of recreating the perfect Captain America.
Yeah, exactly. And the Slash film actually mentioned earlier in the week when the news broke of Lumley's casting, because they do believe that he's playing Isaiah Bradley. They said that the series will be about Falcon initially refusing to take up the mantle of Captain America, but ultimately changing his mind after discovering the secret history of the Super Soldier program by encountering Bradley, who was actually the, quote, original Captain America. While we can't say with 100% certainty that Lumley is definitely playing Bradley, we know that the character is a part of the show, so this casting would make a lot of sense. Now, that's interesting because obviously in the comics, the Bradley's Super Soldier Serum program basically occurs because the US government are desperately trying to rack their brains to get another Captain America. But the idea of positioning Bradley as the original is very, very fascinating. I'm sure there's going to be all sorts of different things going on there as well. One thing I forgot to mention from the original comic as well is that Bradley actually goes to Nazi Germany to destroy their Super Soldier Serum program, then comes back to the US and they actually imprison him and court-martial him for basically going AWOL. And again, another depressingly real kind of reflection of what happened to African American soldiers during these conflicts. And what's really interesting here as well, our very own Simon Gallagher has basically taken a look at all the rumors here.
He's pretty good, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. And he's come up with a very compelling theory that maybe Zemo is the reason why this whole element comes to the fore. I can imagine that after Endgame comes out, we've already speculated this before in previous videos, that Sam Wilson basically tells the government, well, no, I am Captain America. Steve didn't answer to you. He answered to his friends and to the American people. And I can imagine the American government are like, well, Steve Rogers isn't in the picture now, so we'd kind of like to have our own jingoistic puppet to actually do all our bidding, so if that ain't going to be you, bye. And I imagine Sam Wilson basically gets the shield taken away from him at that point. That's when John Walker gets introduced, and we kind of begin to see how the idea of Captain America can be perverted. Now, in the comics, US Agent does eventually come around. He is still a bit of an asshole, but the whole idea of, Captain America basically being misappropriated is a very salient thread to carry on in our current zeitgeist.
Yeah, definitely. And you can sort of see how that would build on not only the past couple Captain America movies, but, well, including Civil War. Like, the big thing of Civil War was Steve being on the opposite side of the government, essentially. So you can see how even though he helped save the entire universe in Endgame and Infinity War, there is still that thread there that the government can twist, because essentially for a long time he was outlawed. He was public enemy number one. He was a problem for the United States. At least that was how it was presented. So you can see how even though Steve Rogers chose Sam as his heir, the government can easily come out and say, well, actually, we don't really care what Steve Rogers thinks. We thank him for his service, but actually, we own the Captain America IP. This is our brand, and we're making a sequel of it using this person. And I do think, I think that's just such a fascinating thread. The more I hear about the series, the more interested I am, because what Captain America stands for, like I said there, has been threaded throughout all of these movies so far. We've had the World War II version of him as a propaganda machine, and then Steve, essentially taking that pigeonholed sort of marketable identity and making it something worth fighting for, and something that resonates with so many people and inspires hope across the entire world.
Yes, I completely agree. And the whole idea, I think, what we're seeing with MCU Phase 4, and even at the tail end of Phase 3 with films like Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home, which both tackled the legacy of Iron Man, I really feel as though this is going to be the through line of Phase 4. Not necessarily with the new IPs being introduced, but certainly in terms of stuff like, Falcon and Winter Soldier, Hawkeye, which is supposedly going to introduce Kate Bishop as a character as well. This is definitely going to look into the legacy of Captain America, and I find that really, really fascinating, because of all the characters in Marvel's library, he is one of the most compelling legacies. Obviously, in 2007, he was killed in after Civil War, and was replaced by Bucky, which is an interesting thread in itself, because Ed Brubaker in that and Steve Epting in that series tackled the idea of worthiness. Was Bucky worthy enough to be Captain America after his past as Winter Soldier? And then obviously you had Sam Wilson come into the scene a few years later, and again, it's another case of like, what does Captain America mean to different people? And I find the idea of them actually approaching this and using Captain America as a lens to tackle historical injustice, and kind of to look at how even the things that we hold most, or the ideas that we see about nationhood and governments and history and stuff, not all of it is rosy. Even the most positive things sometimes come from really dark places, and I find that's a really interesting element in and of itself. And especially I do think that with Zemo being on the scene, I'm really curious to see how this comes into effect, because if he's exposing this program in the first place, are we going to see some pushback from both Sam and Bucky? Are they going to refuse to believe that this is actually the thing? Maybe there's conflict between Sam and Bucky, because Bucky obviously was indoctrinated by Hydra and went to the Soviet Union, and he'll immediately see the parallels between both programs.
That's exactly what I was going to get to next. I think we might see some kind of understanding between Bucky and Zemo if this is the narrative that they're going to go down. Like, they're both essentially fighting against the same sort of injustice, the same sort of mentality of discarding people's lives in the pursuit of something greater, as it were. Power, essentially just the pursuit of absolute power. And I think like that would be a cool thread to bring Bucky back into the fold, because I've always all of the leaks and all of the rumors and all of everything we've heard so far has been focused on, Sam and the Captain America identity. And I've always wondered where Bucky's sort of fallen into that. And Bucky, even though I like him as a character, I feel like he's been slightly underused over the past few movies. Ever since post Winter Soldier. So I think that would be a great way to thread his story back into, the core of this narrative and make him a real integral part of it, and, bring back his history and properly be able to explore him and his relationship to what Captain America means, and as well as the entire super soldier sort of history alongside Sam and whoever is the new Captain America, which obviously will be Sam.
Yeah, it also kind of reminds me a little bit of Watchmen in terms of what that show was dealing with the idea of, applying, superheroes through, the idea of, race relations in the United States, and actually taking a very kind of, matter-of-fact approach about the subject matter and basically examining literally how racism, intersects with these different concepts and what, being a superhero means, and the fact that Captain America is so synonymously, so inextricably linked to the government, that is a big element to tackle in here itself.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see how they actually go about it. I'm curious to see if we're going to get any flashbacks to see when Bradley was actually involved in the Super Soldier Serum program. I'm curious to see if we might see Professor Erskine pop up again. If he was the original Captain America, that spells loads of questions about his involvement with the program. And it's going to be interesting to see how this basically reappraises the first Avenger and how that all carries through. I'm really excited about this one.
Well, that's going to be I love that, because although the first Avenger has a real emotional push to it, it's very funny. It's very sort of like a very clean cut, and I want this to sort of come in and sort of muddy those rose-tinted glasses, as it were. The film itself touches upon that in a couple of instances, but I want this to properly, like exactly like you said, show the sort of darker underbelly, the fact that like America itself, the Captain America identity is sort of built on, I don't know, not something that isn't inherently imperfect.
Well, in that way, there's a thing that people forget about Captain America, is that he was created by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby before America was actually entered the war. Their Captain America was created as a symbol against, fascism and the idea that America wasn't doing enough to help, its European allies. And at the time, there was still a massive, strong, anti-war sentiment going on in the States. So again, anything this series can do to really basically make people reappraise how they see Captain America and understand that there's always been more nuance to it than, people may initially think, I'm all for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so please let us know what you think of this Falcon Winter Soldier theory down in the comments below. Do you think Isaiah Bradley is going to have a big role in the series, or are you wrong? Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and head back on over to whatculture.com for more news, lists, and articles like this every single day. You can follow me on Twitter at YouMaroonsThings. You can follow Josh on Twitter at
Josh Brew with 2 O's.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
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 What would your Captain America name be?
Captain Guillotine.
Very good.